And as I touched on before, there's one thing that's really worth noting, and that's this technique is not just for hostage situations, like mentioned in the book, but it's for everyday conversations where connection and outcomes actually matter. And it's a transferable skill into your business, whether you're working in the online space, whether you're working a bricks and mortar, whether you're providing a service or a product. And as I said, it easily transfers obviously into personal life as well. So, one question that came up for me instantly when I was reading about this was, what's the difference between an open-ended question and calibrated questions? I said, what's the real difference? And I think we all know the difference between open-ended questions and closed questions, open question and closed questions. So basically, open questions are ones that leave the person that you're asking the question, they leave the person answering open to with a reply. So it might be, tell me how you're going to do that. And then they'll come back to you and say XYZ. Or closed questions are very much, with single word answers, yes and no. Are you coming today? No. Yes. It's open-ended questions and closed questions are quite commonly known, but I really wanted to dive a bit more into breaking down what's the difference between an open-ended question and a calibrated question. So, as we just touched on, open-ended questions, these are the what, who, when, where, how type of questions that encourage the other person to give a more in-depth answer than just yes or no. So basically, they're designed to gather information, build a connection, and explore additional options. So, and examples of those are, what made you reach out today? How's your business going this month? What would you like to change about your current system? So, open-ended questions are great for kind of getting more information, exploration, but sometimes they're a bit too broad and they don't move the conversation forward. And calibrated questions from the book, Never Split the Difference, are essentially still open-ended questions, but they are designed to shift control, but also invite problem solving and also, really importantly, reduce defensive. So they're most often started with how or what and are structured in such a way that gently forces or coerces the other person to think deeper, not wider. So let's explain that a little bit more. So they're designed to invite collaboration, diffuse tension or any sort of pushback, create a shared element of responsibility, and also to trigger a thoughtful response. And examples of calibrated questions are, how do you see this working long term? What's the biggest challenge in moving forward right now? How would you like to move ahead from here? Or what's stopping us from starting this today? So they're very non-threatening, but they're also skippable. So they infuse or they start that conversation where you can't just kind of ignore them or skip over them. So they require the other person to do a little bit of thinking, and then they'll be participating in the conversation and in the outcome. So let's look at this in real life, because I can list all the questions off and give you guys examples, but it's really good to see it in practice. So let's just say we've got a situation, we've got the open-ended question, and then we've got a calibrated question as an alternative. So let's say you're in a situation where a team member or a staff member drops the ball or does something wrong. An open-ended question example would be, why didn't you get that done? It could provoke a little bit of a response. It could make the person angry. It could feel like you're attacking them. But a calibrated question to a team member sort of messing something up or dropping the ball or making a mistake is, what's getting in the way of meeting deadlines right now? So it kind of invites that person to maybe share something that went wrong. Oh, the stock wasn't there. Oh, I had to drive across town to pick up something, or whatever they are. It invites them to actually have the conversation about what went wrong, versus an open-ended question, which can come across as being quite accusatory. So let's just say you're on a discovery call. So you might be a coach, you might provide services, you might work in the affiliate space like I do. So a discovery call, you're actually talking to the person about discovering basically what's next, what's the next step. So an open-ended question might be, what are your goals? And if someone asks me that, it's a pretty vague question in reality. So I would probably answer it, but probably not be so truthful. It doesn't sort of pull out, what I want to share honestly. And a lot of these times you're talking to maybe some people that you know, but also maybe some people that are new and you don't really know. And a calibrated question on a discovery call would be, how would you define success from working together? So that kind of opens up the conversation of, you're going to get support from that person, and it encourages them to share how they might see that. So, and a last one as an example is you're stuck. You're simply stuck in a situation. And this could be a conversation between two people. You're at a bit of a stalemate. And an open-ended question would be, what should I do next? And a calibrated question would be, how can I move this forward without overcomplicating it? So calibrated questions are looking for the solution to a problem that may exist, or opening up the conversation to at least look at options of resolving things. So why? Why do these matter for business owners or in your personal life? Because they diffuse client conflict or tricky conversations that you might be avoiding. And we all have those. I do, that's for sure. They can get into the head of a customer's needs, what gets to the core of actually what they're needing. It can empower team members or contractors that you work with. And it can move stuck leads forward in a conversation. And that's quite a common thing when you're working in the online space. And it can help you understand your own mindset blocks as well. You can have the conversation with yourself. If you find yourself sitting on a question or kind of ruminating and going back to same questions over and over and over again, think about reframing it. Think about turning that question that you sort of stuck on into a calibrated type question. And if anybody's struggling with this in regards to maybe if you're even writing an email or anything like that, you kind of think, well, how am I going to use this? I don't know how to ask calibrated questions. Ask, if you've got access to ChatGTP, I highly recommend that even if you haven't got the paid version, you can go into it and say, I'd like your help with some really tough conversations I'm having with clients or leads or with customers. And this is a common question that I get. And I'd like to turn it into what they call a calibrated question by the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And ChatGTP will actually give you the calibrated question version for you. And obviously you can word that and put your own twist on it and things like that. So don't ever feel like you're alone. Use ChatGTP as a tool. It's not here to replace you just yet. And I joke that I don't think ChatGTP is a conversation for another day. It's a very powerful tool, and you should use it exactly as that. You should use it to assist you. So again, some more examples of calibrated questions in business. So let's give you some more practical examples. We talked about the client discovery call, a conflict or a misunderstanding. So a calibrated question could be, a couple of examples could be, how can we get this back on track? What would feel fair to both of us here? So if you imagine if you ask that person, if you're in a kind of a little bit of a misunderstanding, if you put that question to someone that you were struggling to sort of find any middle ground or, get any resolution with, if you ask the question, what would you feel to both of us here? You're giving them the opportunity to give an option to resolve the situation. So you're giving a little bit of that control and power back to them to even the playing field. And let's just say you're going to use it as self-reflection as a business owner. You could ask questions like, how am I showing up in my business this week? That's a powerful one. Imagine if you asked yourself that every morning or at the end of every day, how am I showing up in my business this week? And you actually answered that honestly yourself. Or what is the real fear behind my hesitation? So you've got a great post that you want to share or social media content, or you want to view an opinion on something. What is the real fear behind my hesitation? So these calibrated questions are just they just pack a little bit more punch. So a little bonus, sometimes a common mistake that can happen is we can get stuck in the why questions, and they can come off as being a little bit accusatory to the person that you're asking the question. So maybe think, or just stop before you ask a why question, and don't answer your own question right after asking it. Give it space. And don't turn a why question into manipulation. The key is to be authentic with the curiosity behind these calibrated questions. Don't use them as a weapon. Okay? This is just a little bit of education around using these types of questions to make our lives, better and have more open conversations and things like that, because we all have hard conversations and we don't want to be avoiding them. We want to be sort of opening them up, so we're giving ourselves the best possible chance around communication. And sometimes the why questions can be, as I said, come off as a little bit accusatory. So just be really careful when you ask questions beginning with why, because it puts all the onus back onto the other person. Oh, why did you do that? And I mean, in emails, it's really hard because there's no tone in your voice and things like that. But people read it probably a lot more intensely than what we say it sometimes, depending on how it's the tone behind it. So let's talk about a little bit about the sciencey bit behind calibrated questions. So calibrated questions actually activate the prefrontal cortex, and that's where logic, reasoning, and emotional regulation occur in the brain. So when someone asks a how question, they are more likely to feel ownership over the answer. So that's really powerful. So yeah, again, when you ask someone a how question, they are more likely to feel ownership over the answer. And also studies show that people are more likely to cooperate and move toward a shared goal when they're asked a question this way. So a little bit of action for you guys. A little bit of a challenge, I suppose. And I would love, again, to hear your feedback about this and if you tried it. So your challenge or your homework or however you want to put it, in your next business conversation or in your next conversation that you're having where you can actually have these questions put forward, whether it's a lead, whether it's a team member, or whether it's your own self-reflection, whether it's your husband or your partner or your wife, whoever it may be, pause before making a statement and ask in your head instead, how can I understand this better? What am I missing here? How would this look if it were easy? So just stop and reflect. If you know you're going into a conversation that's maybe going to be a little bit curly or you're worried about, just take a few moments before making a statement or writing that email and ask yourself instead, how can I understand this question better? What am I possibly missing here? And how would this question look if it were easy? So just think about those three things before you sit down with your next conversation, whether you're at your email, whether you're on a phone call, have them written out so that they're there, front of center of mind. And keep those in mind when you're having a conversation with your person. So a short one today. Calibrated questions are really powerful little tiny tools, but they have massive power if they're used correctly. And whether you're negotiating a brainstorming a new idea or just trying to show up more powerfully with more intention in your conversations, this is one teeny tiny shift in your language that can really change your business conversations and your mindset. So I hope you really enjoyed this today. I love sharing these little bits of information that I'm learning and I'm finding out about. And yeah, let me know your key takeaway. Let me know if you'll use calibrated questions. How are they going to affect your business? Let me know. Until next time, have an awesome day.